Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Office of the Vice President for Research 2021 Celebration of Research and Innovation, Day 1's showcase of Temple University's pipeline of research and solutions and innovation. I'm Kimberly Reinagel, Executive Director in the Office for the Vice President of Research, and I want to go over a few logistical notes before we get started. If you have any technical issues during today's meeting, please contact Temple University's ITS support, Mitch Delaney at mitchd@temple.edu or Zoom technical support at 1-888-799-9666 and select option 2. Details on this is also being shared in the webinar chat now. The audio for today's webinar will be streamed through your computer speakers or through the call-in feature, depending on which you selected. Submit any questions you have through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If we are unable to get to your questions during the meeting, it will be posted on OVPR's website. Today's webinar is being recorded. That recording and the meeting slides will also be posted on our website after this meeting. I'm now happy to turn things over to the Vice President for Research at Temple University, Michelle Masucci.
Thank you, Kimberly. Welcome, everyone, to Temple University's 2021 Celebration of Research. I am delighted that you could be with us here today to begin this conversation. We are really pleased to have an event that will consist of our showcase on research innovation that highlights the pipeline of discoveries leading to solutions for society in the form of Temple startups and licensed technologies. Tomorrow, we will put a spotlight on research connected to learning, emphasizing the importance of the university's role in educational research as a foundation of our core mission. We conclude with a roundtable discussion on Thursday among researchers and clinicians who have led Temple University's extraordinary response to the challenges of COVID-19. I want to acknowledge and thank today's presenters, Elham Sahri, Jeffrey Wright, Oscar Perez Leal, Dan Dornbush, and Mike Marcus for sharing with you perspectives on how their companies have been started. I also want to give a special thanks to the university's technology commercialization team led by Steve Nappy and to our external partners who support our companies along the way to their successes. Finally, I would like to give a special thanks to organizers Todd Abrams, Julie Stapleton Carroll, Lou Bicelli, and Kimberly Reinagel for their work to bring this virtual event together. I'm going to take a few minutes to share some research highlights from the past year, and then I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, Tiffany Wilson, President and CEO of the University City Science Center. Temple University is the proud home to a world-class research and knowledge enterprise that has achieved excellence at the cutting edge of discovery in basic and life sciences, the advancement of frontiers of science and technology that is translational and societal in nature to address our most complex, compelling, and challenging problems. Temple University's outstanding faculty are at the forefront of research and the development enterprise at the university. They design new materials through computational processes, have eliminated HIV from the genomes of living animals, are seeking to discover the building blocks of dark matter, have identified novel therapeutics for metabolic diseases, use geospatial technologies to support biodiversity, develop and test new theories to support better learning outcomes and educational leadership strategies, which will be the highlight and feature of tomorrow's celebration. We're very proud of our funding successes as we continue as a top 100 university in research expenditures. We've had a run beginning in 2013 to have that status. We just filed our National Science Foundation Higher Education Research and Development Survey, the NSF HERD, last week, and we reported $299.7 million in research expenditures for the year. In the prior year, we were ranked 85th for overall funding and 56th for funding among public universities. And Temple University is classified as a Research 1 institution by the Carnegie classification system, signifying our achievement of very high research and placing us among the 131 institutions that are so designated. Obviously, we're very happy about our $299.7 million in research expenditures. It's not quite 300 million, but we're getting there. We've had a surge in COVID-19 projects at $30.4 million in funded programs this year, including 36 clinical trials and 17 basic research programs. We have 33.2 million more in pending support. And I was informed by my compliance team that we had one COVID-19 protocol being reviewed every 3 days for the past year, just to give you an idea of how strong the response has been at Temple University to deal with advancing the science towards both treating and really addressing the COVID challenge. Temple University's highlights are listed below in some of these little vignettes. You'll see that there's a heavy life sciences focus of some of these recent stories, as well as a heavy data analytic and sustainability research focus to our work. This is all done by our 525 PIs, 30% of whom have $1 million or more in funding, and 4% of whom have at least $5 million in funding. And that's a trend that has been continuing for some time, where we have larger projects coming into the institution. When you break it down in terms of the type of research that we do, biomedical and life sciences leads with heavy participation from our School of Medicine, our Fox Chase Cancer Center, and the colleges that comprise our health sciences research at the university, representing 62% of the total. We have 14% of our total awards coming from science, technology, and engineering. We have 18% of our total coming from social, educational, arts, and humanities research. And increasingly, we have a large number of projects that are coming in that are university-wide in nature and are cross-cutting in terms of how they are organized. Temple University's research enterprise is a platform for training a next generation of scholars and researchers, and to address some of society's most important problems. We also think it contributes heavily to Temple University and the health system's $8.9 billion economic impact on the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and on advancing our local knowledge economy. The way I like to conceptualize this is that we have $300 million of research funding that's a driver of our knowledge enterprise. Obviously, it's not the entire story, because we're an educational institution that provides a wonderful opportunity for nearly 40,000 students to pursue. You add all that together, and of course, we think research is a very important contributor to the economic development profile of the university, which we do in partnership with partners around the city. I've highlighted the University City Science Center because, of course, we have the CEO here with us today, but we're very happy to be working in tandem with all of these partners. When we look at how the university is positioned in the landscape of higher education, and think hard about what does research mean in terms of that positioning. We're a top 100 research university. We're a Carnegie 1 institution. We are reporting in the top 120 in terms of enrollment to the Department of Education every year through our IPED survey. We're a public institution that is comprehensive with respect to the composition of colleges, including that we have a College of Medicine and our partners to a health system. And importantly, we're located in one of the top 10 most populated cities. And I've listed here below for you all of those cities, just so that you can keep that in mind. When you factor all of that together, Temple is the second largest US public university in terms of enrollment to meet all of the criteria that I've listed above. second only to UCLA. Looking ahead, Temple University is involved in actually developing a science innovation hub of our own. This will include a service center for the research community, a convening space for events such as this one, which I hope we'll be able to do in person when we're able to return to in person, and an incubator for our very earliest stage companies that we hope will graduate and then move on to other research parks in the city, much like what the Science Center has to offer. When we contemplate that facility, we're looking at an 8,000 square foot development on the 4th floor of our School of Dentistry. And that will be renovated over the course of this year. We've already started demolition on the project, and we're working with architects to finalize the design plan. It will build on the success of nearly $180 million that we've had invested in our Temple University startup community, including both investments in companies and the purchase and acquisition of those companies. And we're very pleased to be able to say that this project is being done in partnership with funding from Shiro and other partners. So let me turn our attention to my colleague, Tiffany Wilson, who I was very fortunate enough to be able to bring, to be a part of bringing on board as a part of the search committee to the Science Center. She brings to her new role as CEO of the Science Center more than 18 years of leadership in transitioning innovation around medical technologies from benchtop to bedside, building partnerships across academia, industry, and economic development organizations. Prior to her Science Center role, she served as the CEO of Global Center for Medical Innovation, GCMI, an Atlanta-based nonprofit dedicated to supporting the development and commercialization of innovative medical products. She joined GCMI in 2011 to lead its startup phase, establishing an overall vision, building strategic relationships, and bringing together key stakeholders of the medical device ecosystem. Her strong background in medical devices, her commitment to fostering innovation and understanding of business strategies propelled her into a leadership role in the Southeast and brought her into the national spotlight. She served on the National Advisory Council of Innovation and Entrepreneurship, NACI, of the U.S. Department of Commerce. She was recognized by Inc. magazine as one of 17 inspiring women to watch in 2017, and one of Becker Hospital Review's 110 women in med tech to know. It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce to you Tiffany Wilson.
Thanks so much, Michelle, and good afternoon, everyone. As Michelle mentioned, I'm Tiffany Wilson. I'm delighted to welcome you today to Temple University's celebration of research and innovation. Special thank you again, Michelle, who is one of the Science Center's esteemed board members and also chair of our scientific advisory committee. It's a pleasure to have been invited. So as president and CEO of the University City Science Center, we see firsthand how critical academic research is to the pipeline of healthcare innovations. We really recognize that startups will be the source of both new innovation and net job growth on the other side of the pandemic. And that's why we are laser focused on identifying, accelerating, and investing in research and companies that address unmet clinical needs. Today's showcase is all about celebrating those bold ideas and a willingness to think beyond the status quo. As Michelle mentioned, prior to joining the Science Center in October, I had the privilege of leading the startup and growth of the Global Center for Medical Innovation, also a not-for-profit organization based in Atlanta, really dedicated to supporting the development and commercialization of innovative medical products. And so it was quite a journey as building GCMI, kind of leading the startup phase, really honing in on that vision and bringing that ecosystem together. That role really prepared me for this next chapter at the Science Center, where our mission is to commercialize promising technologies, cultivate talent for a 21st century economy, and convene people to inspire action. We recognize that promising technology doesn't always find its way into the market, and rising startups with the potential to change the world won't always find success. We know it takes more than a bright idea to succeed in the highly competitive life science landscape. To that end, our commercialization programs are designed to fill these gaps in the resources and connect the dots for researchers and founders, enabling technologies and companies to really fulfill their potential. The Science Center, we've been supporting commercialization of technology for close to 60 years. It's one of the things that really drew me from Atlanta to Philadelphia. And that experience has really taught us that all early stage enterprises, they all face similar challenges. And so at the Science Center, we really help startups put those teams into place, identify the early resources, and make those connections with our vast network of not only academic and research institutions around the region, but also industry partners around the country. A particularly relevant example is related to a little company called Centocor, which got its start at the Science Center back in the 70s. That company later merged with J&J as a subsidiary. In 2001, changed its name to Janssen Biotech, which, you know, Janssen has become a household name in recent months as the developer behind one of the one-dose COVID-19 vaccine that is very much highlighted in the news this week. But beyond that, Centocor created thousands of jobs while improving the lives of millions of patients suffering from autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, and Crohn's disease. That company's signature product, which I'm sure you've heard on TV, Remicade, continues to be a top-selling drug for the parent company, J&J. And so this is just one example of the real-world impact of supporting for promising early stage companies. And while the needs of the startups have evolved over time, our work to support the commercialization and growth remains steadfast. Over the last 10 years alone, the Science Center has supported over 600 startups and invested $13.4 million with over $1 billion raised in follow-on funds, which is really impressive in this sector. What makes our work unique is our network of partners and the spectrum in which we operate. It could be a researcher in an academic lab, several of whom we'll hear from today, a recently formed startup who needs an experienced management team, or it could be a company with a prototype ready to find its first customers, and the science supports organizations at each one of those phases. We are an independent 501c3, and the Science Center works with over 30 academic and research institutions from across the Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware tri-state area. And this really gives us a unique insight into the incredible research taking place across the region, and really an opportunity to connect those researchers and institutions not only to each other, but to other resources externally and funding. Among those valued partners is Temple University, which is the shareholder of the Science Center, a partner institution for our QED proof of concept program, and whose alumni are well represented across our suite of commercialization programs. Our QED program provides funding, business development support for academic researchers who are developing early stage life sciences and healthcare technologies that have high commercial potential. This program really gives the researchers the knowledge and the tools needed that they'll need to seek follow-on funding in the private sector to really advance their projects around the commercialization pathway. And so through QED, we've worked with over 40 Temple PIs, including Dr. Oscar Perez of Express Cells, who you'll hear from shortly. And just last month, our investment of up to $400,000 in 8 companies through our Launch Lane Accelerator, with this cohort focused on digital health. And so Launch Lane helps tech-enabled startups transition really from that prototype to the first sale and customer acquisition. The accelerator, what really excites me about it is it utilizes a blind application process designed to debias the selection process, which has resulted in over half of our participants being women or minority led, and with an 85% success rate, setting it apart from other programs of its kind. The 50 plus members that are IC at 3401 Incubator represents the largest group of funded early stage tech companies in Philadelphia, and membership has actually grown since the beginning of the pandemic. So some esteemed alumni of IC at 3401 includes Roar for Good, founded by Temple grad Yasmin Mustafa, which raised its crowdfunding campaign and delivered its first product while still a member of IC at 3401. Who's Your Landlord, founded by Temple grad Afo Ezwigo, who works with tenants to find better landlords. And then Biosignal Analytics, which uses technology by Dr. Obiad of Temple, who also received Science Center funding. And so as a member of the Health and Human Services BARDA Drive Network, the Science Center helps identify technologies that address national health security threats, with COVID-19 as a more recent example, and sepsis. Over the last 3 years, we've connected close to 80 companies and researchers to BARDA for potential support. And so it's really this connective tissue at the Science Center that bonds our commercialization activities to our convening capabilities through our weekly venture cafe, Thursday gatherings, and our quorum programming. And so Michelle mentioned we transitioned to virtual environment pretty quickly, and Venture Cafe has continued a steady stream of speakers, workshops, networking opportunities, albeit virtually, but they're really necessary to build businesses and a thriving innovation community. And so in 2020 alone, we attracted over 15,000 people to over 800 virtual events and in-person events. All of this is to say is we hope you'll consider the Science Center a resource for you and a partner along your commercialization pathways. And I really want us to work together to create companies that will positively impact the world. You can learn more about us at sciencecenter.org, and we're always happy to connect with you and answer questions. So I wanted to thank you again, Michelle and Temple, for the opportunity to speak today. And without further ado, I'm really looking forward to hearing from this impressive group of researchers and learning more about how they're laying the groundwork for the healthcare solutions of tomorrow. So I think, we'll get started with the panel. What I love about how this panel was really put together was the examples of the different phases that are involved in moving early stage research into development and commercialization. And it's a long, hard journey. It's not for the faint of heart. And so kudos to my panelists for signing up for the job and all the great work that you're doing. It's truly inspiring. And so moving from getting started from discovery into development, gaining investment, and then growing in the market, I think you'll hear from that today, and the broad spectrum of experiences that will hopefully inspire you as we move forward. So on that note, we'll start with Elham. And really getting started. So Elham, it's been great to meet you and connect with you. Tell us, who you are and your area of research, and really how the research has led to the beginning of an idea to position you to do a startup.
Thank you, Tiffany, for inviting me to start the panel. It's a pleasure to talk today about our most recent research endeavor in developing impact-resistant batteries. I have joined Temple in 2018 as assistant professor in the mechanical engineering department at Temple, and I'm leading electric vehicle safety lab. So we have been doing research on batteries, and we have been characterizing lithium-ion batteries for electric cars. We are moving to developing impact-resistant batteries through Royal Power, that is a newly formed a startup. If we can go to the slides, maybe I can show what we have in terms of research. There's a video there on the bottom right that if we can play that, it shows what happens if a battery cell in an electric vehicle gets short-circuited, and the amount of energy that is released. So we have considered that as a serious issue that needs to be addressed through research, and we have been doing tests on lithium-ion batteries for electric cars through MIT Battery Consortium and a sponsorship of a lot of vehicle manufacturers and battery manufacturers. And we have developed models of batteries and models of how these batteries fail during deformation. And we have found out how the separator in the battery can fail after failure of current collectors. So in the most recent research we are developing impact resistant cells that increases the safe limit of batteries from the green area that we can see here in the middle graph into the blue area. So delaying these events, short circuit and failure that leads to a thermal runaway. And we have joined, if we go to the next slide, we have joined forces with very technical people from industry. My co-founder at Royal Power, Robab Safabakhsh, is a Boeing technology flow, retired recently. And we are developing this technology together with also Eric Carson, who recently retired from Boston Power Company, a startup in Massachusetts. And that was very successful technology development in battery area. And we are joining with Taylor Durham from UPenn Wharton School for our marketing, and with Mildred Hospeka that is helping us with IP licensing issues. So we are hoping to have a manufacturing company in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, and make next generation of safe batteries for the country and the world to be in future electric vehicles, and make us safer while we are moving toward cleaner environments with electric technologies. We look forward to working with a lot of resources in the Science Center at Temple, and we have already received a lot of support from our Temple Technology Office for IP patenting, and we have received our first funding to develop these batteries. Hopefully our prototypes will be coming out soon, and we will continue this path forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's inspiring. I love seeing female scientists navigate the pathway of entrepreneurship. It's always inspiring. I think what we'll do is go through each speaker and each area, and then I'd like to maybe have a follow-up conversation to learn more about your journey and when you approached the tech transfer office and what advice you might have and those sorts of things. And so next, moving on to discovery, we have Jeff Wright.
Great, thanks a lot, Tiffany. I will tell you a similar journey of having to go through many steps in order to develop the IP, and then also find a team that really supports us. And that was done through a lot of help from the Tech Transfer Office. And I want to make sure I give full credit to them for hooking me up with our current CEO and all the people that we've worked with along the way. I believe I gave you a video that if you want to go to that, and hopefully I'll have that just playing in the background and you can look at, this is a sort of a promo and instructional video. We're a VR-based technology. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Jeff and I'm a professor in the College of Public Health and the director of the Neuromotor Science graduate program. Have a background in engineering and neuroscience, and that's really helped me as I've started developing these ideas. I've been working with virtual reality technology since my grad school years, so since the mid-90s. And I also started working about 20 years ago in posturography, which is the study of postural control. And all of us standing on our 2 feet is a difficult process, and we study this in lots of pathologies and even in healthy older adults and young adults who have concussions. And so balance problems are something that everyone will face in their life. In fact, 1 in 4 adults over 65 will fall every year. So what we did is developed a technology-based device that uses built-in, uses commercial technology. And we've developed a software solution to integrate with some of these commercially available technologies to be able to detect balance deficits and try and sensitively and specifically identify where this problem might be coming from. So really, we're doing a lot of development in validation right now. We're working with older adult living facilities, with clinical sites locally, and running a lot of validation studies. And that's the step where we're at right now. We've been doing lots of pitches to angel investors, and our hope is to get this technology in older adult living facilities and clinical sites all throughout the country, and making a very portable solution that can be research grade solution that allows people to detect balance deficits very sensitively, much better than the observational or functional tests that they currently have on hand. That video was 2 minutes, so I think that gives me my time is up sign. So I certainly can answer more questions when we get into the Q&A part, but I'll pass the torch back to Tiffany.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. Appreciate it. Look forward to hearing more. So next up, we have Oscar, really talking about the development process, moving on from discovery to development.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oscar Perez Leal. I am a professor at the School of Pharmacy, where I do research in basically developing new genetic tools to improve the drug discovery process. And if we can go next slide. I started working on the new technologies for doing genome editing to develop cellular models for drug discovery around 6 years ago, when CRISPR genomic engineering technology became really famous. And I noticed that the process was not user-friendly. There were not tools that were easy to handle to develop those cell models or the type of models that I wanted to generate. And I also noticed that the process of making these cell lines was too slow, but mostly because in order to build those genetic tools, you have to make them for each individual gene that you want to modify, and the process is not biologically efficient, so you have to spend a lot of time also isolating the cells that get the modification that you want. So to try to make my work much easier, I came up with an idea to develop this process in a much simpler way. And I quickly realized that this was going to be useful for other scientists or for companies that were probably going through the same problem. So I immediately contacted the patent office at Temple, show my idea, and they helped me, go through the process to get a patent file and basically start this process to translate this into a potential company. So if you go into next slide, I want to tell you about, what are the type of things that we can do with this technology. So this technology allows us to label the genes that produce the proteins that we want to study for, let's say, developing a new drug. And the advantage of the technology is that we can label multiple proteins in the same cell, and we can look at these proteins while the cells are alive. without using any type of staining or any type of fixing. So any type of drug discovery technology can be used to read these cells. And these processes, are highly used by pretty much any pharmaceutical company these days. So we started Express Cells with a business partner that was introduced to me by the Science Center. And basically together, we came up with a business plan and set of basically ideas into action to build a company to create these models for companies that were interested in using the latest genomic research to do drug discovery. And that's how our company came to exist about 2 years ago. And it has been, as Tiffany mentioned, a long journey with a lot of ups and downs, but altogether very rewarding to know where we are right now with already multiple customers and a team of 8 employees in the company. So very exciting. Tiffany?
Wonderful, and congratulations on your recent equity raise.
Thank you.
Great news. And so speaking of equity raise, we're going to move on to investment. So you've gotten started, you've worked on your research, it spins into development and then really positioned for achieving those milestones that are going to position you for the next round of investment. And so Dan, thanks for joining. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became to be CEO of Excision Biotherapeutics?
Sure. My name is Daniel Dornbush. I've been in the biotech industry for a couple of decades now, starting in about 1997. Degrees in genetics, English, degrees in public health, and then business from Harvard Business School. I started at Genzyme in the mid 90s, of course acquired by Sanofi later on, went to Genentech, worked in the commercial organizations for several years, moved on to Novartis, was there for several jobs in several years, and then started with small companies. I've been with Excision since late 18, mid 19, so a couple of years now. Excision's a company. Our goal is to develop CRISPR-based therapies to cure viral infectious diseases and improve the lives of chronically ill patients. We use a version, I should say an adaptation. Question there? Oh, that's a noise in the background. We use an adaptation of CRISPR, a specific approach developed at Temple University. We also have IP license from UC Berkeley. Sorry, I'm getting an echo somewhere. From Jennifer Doudna's lab at UC Berkeley to do so. We've become the first company in history to cure animals, to remove HIV genomes from animals and to create a functional cure with a therapeutic. We're aiming at starting human clinical trials later this year. And as it shows in bullet 3, and to your specific question, we've raised just over $80 million to date. To give you an idea of the CRISPR's unique approach with CRISPR, yeah, go ahead and hit the play. What you see, the video is taking a little bit to load here, but the concept here, the light gray, and perhaps you can click it to play a couple of times and make it a little more, looks like it's taxing whatever computer is running. But the idea here is that the normal genome is in the light gray. The viral genome, HIV, hepatitis B, JC virus, which causes PML, or herpes simplex virus, which includes the 4 pipeline programs we currently have. The dark gray DNA in the schematic represents the integrated virus and the infection to a person. You'll see the 2 sort of circular pieces come in with the yellow in the middle. Those are actually CRISPR proteins or graphic representations of CRISPR proteins that would come and bind to either side there of the dark gray DNA, make their cuts, thereby removing or excising, such as excision, large portions of the viral genome. Now, intracellular proteins then come in and reanneal the DNA back together. That's what the group has been working on since 2012, since CRISPR was first articulated by Doudna and Charpentier, of course, with the Nobel Prize now. So that's what we're attempting to do. We'll be delivering it as a one-time IV infusion to people later this year. This will be the first program in the pipeline would be a one-time IV infusion for HIV. And the goal, of course, for the therapeutic would be curative. Happy to take questions.
Super exciting, Dan. Thanks so much. Mike, so moving on to the market. So finally get there, ready to launch. You've been with HGE for a while, really since the beginning. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more of the history of HGE Health?
Sure. Thanks everybody for spending time with us today. So again, I'm Mike Marcus. I'm CEO of HGE Health. I'm a social psychologist by training. I left academics. I started a company in the healthcare space, became interested and close with the folks at Temple Tech Transfer, and started looking at intellectual property coming out of the health science campus, and came across the work of Jerry Kreiner. Jerry's chief of pulmonology at Temple. And when I met him, and this is back in 2008, he was just completing a clinical trial for remote patient monitoring for folks with COPD. And if you haven't met Jerry, he is an incredible, I think he's probably the best pulmonologist on the planet. And he was helping patients in this clinical study when they have an escalation of their COPD symptoms, they have difficulty breathing. And if they couldn't talk to a doctor, they end up going to the emergency department. So Jerry's idea was a pretty simple one, which was he took the old Palm Pilot device at the time. He created a novel symptom scoring index, which allowed him to understand the typical symptoms for COPD patients, and then look for escalation of symptoms. And then if there was an escalation of symptoms outside the four walls of the hospital, he would respond same day in the same way that he would respond if he was having a face-to-face interaction with that patient. So interestingly enough, right, there's around 200 million people around the world with COPD. They're having exacerbations all the time, and they don't have good access, immediate access to care. And of course, if you can't breathe, you're in big trouble. And so his idea, what we're trying to translate to the rest of the world, is identify when a patient has an escalation of symptoms and be able to provide a same-day instantaneous response. If you go to the first slide, I think I have. What we early on discovered is, from a technology perspective, you can take and create an app that allows a patient to baseline their symptoms, understand if they have an escalation. The problem is, in healthcare, there's no one there to respond to it. So until the device itself becomes a diagnostic and provides that direct therapy, we've built a company that has a large service component. So since 2012, we've done we went through all the stages of development, doing series of clinical trials. But in terms of trying to bring this into the market, we've built a technology-enabled service company. So we have technology that we think is best in class to monitor patients with COPD. And we've built a company that provides a set of services, nurses, health assistants, coaches, that act as an extension of a provider or a payer customer, allowing them to manage large numbers of patients remotely and provide same-day response to keep patients stable and out of the hospital. And if you go to the next slide, I think I'm supposed to talk a little bit about, from a marketing perspective. So we've reached the stage in which we've established our reference customers. Our business model is to work directly and contract directly with payers and providers. On the payer side, the technology has become good enough where we have great predictability about when patients at any given day have an escalation of symptoms, and our services are such that we can respond to those patients very, very quickly. So on the payer side, we've established the first in the country value-based at-risk agreements with large payers in which we're managing large numbers of COPD patients at risk, meaning we don't generate revenue unless patients are taken care of and they stay out of the hospital, saving money for the payer, and then we generate revenue from the savings. On the provider side, as new reimbursement codes become available, we partner with providers providing essentially the technology and services for them to, for the first time, have visibility for all of their patients in between office visits and outside the hospital. So they have good visibility and can provide really great care for patients. We're really super excited about the possibilities of this, of course, going on in the future for all chronic diseases. We've established some really good reference customers, which allowed us to recently be acquired by a company called Vapotherm, which is a publicly traded company in the respiratory space. Their current technology is available for patients in respiratory distress inside the four walls of the hospital. They're going to be bringing that technology into the home where we are today. And so combining, again, therapies that are typically only deployed in the hospital setting, but doing it in the home and remotely is what we're doing today and what we'll continue to do moving forward. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that, Mike. And so let's kind of open it up. I think we can. There we go. The Hollywood Squares shot. And so this has been really interesting, and I think great examples of those distinct pathways from ideation through market and scale. So kind of starting back again at the beginning, Elham, you know, how did you talk about your process for letting the university know, like, I have this idea, I think I could do a startup? How do you do that?
Yeah, my first contact was with Steve and Todd, and I discussed with them that we have been trying to bring the result of all of our understanding about batteries into manufacturing, something that improves upon what is already commercialized and in the market. And I have joined forces with my co-founder with industry experience. And Todd and Steve were very helpful in telling us about all the resources that Temple has and we have in Philadelphia, and how we can start by protecting the IP and how we can get all sorts of assistance from Temple to move ahead and get our product developed, get our IP developed, and get into actually having a prototype that we can show to investors, and finally reach the goal of becoming a manufacturing. So we are seeing this path forward. We have started, and we hope that we'll be moving along with all this support to get where we see at the end of tunnel.
Wonderful. Jeff, I'm curious. So on that same note of your reaching out to tech transfer and working with them, and really, so I spent a lot of time thinking about the capital continuum and the challenges of moving from research into commercialization, where research is funded by sources of non-dilutive funding, you know, NIH, NSF, those sorts of things. And then a lot of you've got to balance getting enough, using those dollars to validate your research and do everything you need to do, but make sure that you're positioned, you have all the data and information that the private sector, right, that the dilutive funding is going to require. Can you talk a little bit about how you built, you know, your investigations to really build that knowledge base to form the basis of the company and position you for funding?
Yeah. So honestly, it didn't occur to me until probably a few years into doing research on this topic that there might be something marketable here. I had seen a couple other colleagues file IP at various times throughout my career, and I didn't fully understand why they were doing it, because I thought we were just disseminating our science. But the longer you work with your science, the more you realize that these ideas, they might only get read by a few hundred people if you publish them in peer-reviewed papers, or they might actually have an impact that goes to millions of people. And so the process for me is the typical one where you're applying for grant funding. I had gotten some DoD funding, and it supported development of some technology. Then there was a change in commercial available technology in VR around 2011, and that's when I had a realization that this could really all be made much more portable. And I've been working with the VR headsets going all the way back to the 90s, and they just weren't up to speed, and they were far too expensive, like $50,000. So when honestly Oculus Rift made these things commercially available, that changed the whole field for how I could take my science and make it accessible to many people. So at that step, I saw there was Steve Nappy from Tech Transfer had put an advertisement out for QED coincidentally, and I applied for that. But before I did that, he told me I needed to file a disclosure, and that's when I really started getting into this process of protecting IP, and then moving it from then. And so that's been, that was about 5 years ago. And so it's been a process where you apply for these incubators, I guess, organizations, and also continue to apply for things like SBIR and extramural funding. And meanwhile, you're just continuing to do your research in your lab. And eventually I got paired up with a serial entrepreneur, and he helped build a company around this. He was very excited about it. And after that, you realize you really need these business-oriented entrepreneur types in order. I mean, I'm a scientist and I'm no dummy, but I'm certainly no expert in what it takes to build a company. And so it's been really eye-opening for me working with the Tech Transfer Office and with the people who have been helping build this company.
Yeah, it's interesting that you highlight that. And so what I get inspired when I see scientists really make that transition, right, to understand it for my project to have broad impact on society. I know my papers are great, my publications are great, but eventually it needs to turn into a product that somebody wants to buy over and over and over again. Right. Yeah. Kind of that pathway, and that you should, scientists should be involved and be able to go on that entrepreneurial journey. Yeah. And so it's really, I think, finding that balance between kind of the academic work and then the ability to put the multidisciplinary puzzle together and team to get to the other side of that. So Oscar, I'm interested, you just raised a round of equity, and can you talk a little bit about, number one, some of the technical developments that enabled your product to come to life, but then your transition from working in a lab to partnering with an experienced entrepreneur to position you for funding?
Yes, so that was a very interesting process, and as Jeff says, I found it better as well to find a business partner, to take care of the business part of the idea. Because as a scientist, you think that you know some about that, but in reality you don't know much. And the business partner role is basically, I will call it, two components. The first one is to take the lead to raise funds to make the company viable and to start. And the second one is to put together the team in the company that is going to execute that work. Because we as scientists, the large majority of the people in this group, we stay working as professors in the university. And we are advisors of the company, but at the end of the day, somebody in the company will have to do the work to take, those ideas and to turn those ideas into a product that is going to be, sold to a customer. So to put that team is a really key factor. So that is the advantage of having a knowledgeable business partner. This business partner ideally should be a person that is well connected with the investor network of the city where you are, and that also have, participated in this process before. So it has experience in how to basically conduct the conversations that are necessary to raise these funds and to make the thing happen. So we have the idea to create a company, we have everything in place, we register the company, but we couldn't start, working as a company until we were able to raise money enough to pay for a lab and to hire our first scientist to execute the work. The key thing at the beginning, once we get to that point, what we got to that point was to transfer all the knowledge from the lab into the company. So to develop all the standard operating procedure documents, to basically you want this process to be independent of the user. So if that employee leaves, for example, you need to hire another person, and that new person has to carry on with the work. So you have to make the process kind of independent of the person doing the work for the company to be able to operate. So all that was something where the business partner helps a lot to put together, basically.
How difficult was that in really kind of moving from, your own lab to where you can do, you're the boss of your lab, and then you're moving into this environment, it's other people's money, you're having to put the quality controls around it, that structure. How did you navigate that?
It was actually not that complicated. Basically, what we did is we hire a consultant that have expertise in setting up an operation process in a company. And between that person, myself, and the new scientist that got hired, we created documents. And basically, I trained the first scientist in the company. And while we were, doing the training, we were evaluating the documents and updating the documents in real time. If there was something that I was teaching that was not in the original document, that has to be immediately modified. So we basically put together some time to build this set of procedures that the scientists at the company will have to follow, just to make sure that the things were doing right. And the other thing that we have to do differently was to be more strict in the quality control. So we have to put more quality control steps in the process, because now we were, planning to sell a product that potentially a customer will, make a request because something was not working as expected or things like that. So we have to put more quality control, more rigorous quality control, to make sure that a person, buying one of these products was getting a top of the line service and a top of the line product, basically.
That's great. Thanks for sharing. So Dan, speaking of investment, raising money, so can you talk a little bit and share your knowledge and background around raising funds, and who are the types of people and institutions that invest, and how you're deploying those funds to really achieve the value proposition and make your shareholders happy?
Oh, we can talk for hours about that. The best investors we've found are ones that share our vision, are well versed in the technology that we're using, know the therapeutic area, know the markets, know how companies are built well, and also bring great contacts in terms of board members, scientific advisors, and their networks as well. So we vetted quite a few investors. We were in a nice position that we were oversubscribed over 2x in our last fundraising, where we closed 60. It was just, we're really blessed to have such a great group of investors for Excision, and and enjoy them every day. I get texts and emails and phone calls every day from them, and it's always great speaking with them. So I'd suggest others just find specific. For us in biotech, it's always it tends to always be, not always, but it tends to always be venture investors. It's coalesced around specific venture capital groups. And so that's how we've approached it. I suggest finding like-minded investors, individuals, entrepreneurs who can help build a business. It's not just the money by any means. In fact, you could say money's secondary. Does that answer your question, Tiffany, or is there something?
Yeah. What advice might you have? And so what series are you in right now?
A.
Okay.
We
Wonderful.
just closed our A round.
Okay. And
in
so
February.
when you started, and so if I'm
I guess just the pitch, sorry to interrupt, but the pitch would be, we're probably going to go out for our B round in the summer. So in the next couple of months.
Excellent. Good luck.
Thanks.
What advice do you have for, if I'm a researcher at Temple, working on a new biotechnology, kind of life sciences technology, and I'm thinking about my seed round and positioning for Series A. What do people need to be thinking about earlier in the process that maybe they don't otherwise do?
Especially in the biotech field, it's a relatively small ecosystem. Those who are funding companies and moving these along know the others. So my suggestion is network as much as you can. Get to know, show up at the venture investors meetings in Philadelphia, Boston, San Francisco, New York. There's no shortage of life science meetings that you can attend, and try to reach out so that you can get to know them, they can get to know you. That will also start getting you into the ecosystem of who's funding, which firms and individuals are funding your type of endeavors. You'll find specific firms prefer oncology, gene editing, monoclonal antibodies, targeted antibodies, small molecules. There's different people who focus in different areas. I'd suggest just
I think that's great advice. And, a lot of times it's difficult to leave an academic environment and go into these other kind of business networking type things. It's sometimes a little outside your comfort zone, but it is so critically important to be able to build those connections. And something when you introduce yourself, it fascinated me kind of learning about your background that I think I'll share. So there's an article, I believe in, so your background is science, English, and business.
You're scaring me now. What have I done?
I'm not going to ask you a question. I'm just sharing for the group, some food for thought. So there was an opinion piece in the New York Times over the weekend around the importance of humanities, and how, I really started to think about it in my, over the last 20 years, and my background's not a technical either. It's an international business. And I went to, had the privilege of attending liberal arts colleges. So had that exposure to history and religion and philosophy, along with the technical, hard business sciences and things like that. But it got me thinking, and really the successful leaders that I've seen in this sector, in med tech, in biotech, in life sciences, it requires so much interaction, multidisciplinary teams between scientists and business and engineers and lawyers and government, everyone having to figure out that puzzle to get it across the finish line. Yet those disciplines are not always, well equipped to communicate effectively with each other. So it's just something to kind of think about, if I'm an academic researcher at Temple and I'm interested in this space, just kind of being prepared to go into these different situations and collaborate and communicate with people who may not speak in the same language that you do, might not have the same incentives that you do, and how important it is to kind of go backwards and look at the history and communications. So just some food for thought, something that I started off this week thinking about it. And when you mentioned your background, I was like, oh, here's an example.
Yeah. It's funny. The only reason that English came up is one of my best friends in college, Deb Hurett, bet me that I couldn't do it. I was a biology major and I took my first English class as a junior, and she said, I said, maybe I'll major in English. She said, you can't do that. You've only got 3 semesters left. So anyway, it was a bet that I couldn't do it, and I ended up doing it. But actually, it got me my first job, though. Trying to break into biotech. I was in a master's program at Tufts Medical School, and wanted to be at Genzyme. And they said, you have no experience. You have no idea. But wait a second, you've got an English degree. You can write these things up. So they had me write a business plan. I essentially interviewed scientists, and it got me in. So I don't know, perhaps yes, whatever.
Got to mix it up a little bit. You got to
find an edge somewhere. I was 22 or whatever.
So thanks so much. So Mike, can you talk a little bit about the commercialization journey of, your team's positioning to market the product? I'm particularly interested in when you talk about the evolution from the technology to a technology plus service component, and really working with the payers and the customers in that way. But really, how important was the adoption of your products towards your towards your exit, and give us a status update on where the company is now. What's the outlook?
So I'm having flashbacks. Fortunately, unfortunately, I'm trying to look back on my life now. You're all making me think about my life. My wife, I met her when she was 1 semester away from graduating as an English major. And I met her, and then she decided to go get a doctorate in psychology. So Dan, that story resonated with me. And she's actually my business partner as well. So we co-found all of our companies together. And so Tiffany, diverse backgrounds really do bring a lot of ingenuity into this space. I've been through the whole life cycle of this company. One of the things that was critical, I think, to our exit, quite frankly, was when I sat down with the founder and the inventor of the original technology, Jerry. I asked him in his office, do you want to just take the intellectual property and have us develop it from a business perspective, or do you want to be involved all along this entire journey? And so he wanted to be involved through the entire journey. So our approach was different, and we worked with him hand in hand. And that was a big part of how we established ourselves in the marketplace. Again, to Dan's point, it's a pretty small community when you start segmenting, say pulmonologists at academic institutions who are going to be the first adopters of new technology like this. And so Jerry's participation was key through our entire development life cycle, raising capital, doing funding and research design, and the various milestones. When it finally came time to establish a business around it, this is where there was potential conflict with how best to deploy the technology, and how you had to make modifications to the technology to make sure that it was commercially available. But when we went into that final phase, it was establishing, how do we make money from this? How can it fit within a very slow healthcare landscape for these new technologies, particularly digital health? And so it was just a lot of hard work, quite frankly, and luck to establish, key models of how this would be paid for at scale in a payer and a provider network. And once we were able to establish those milestones, it was the final piece. So the clinical foundation was set. That was, a key milestone for clinical adoption. And then from a business model perspective, having value-based contracts where healthcare is moving from a fee-for-service to a value-based. Again, being first in the country to do that for a chronic disease was a real differentiator for our eventual acquisition. So it was a combination of the technology and the data over time, but the value-based contract we got with Horizon Blue Cross was a key milestone that Vapotherm utilized in terms of making a decision to acquire us. And for us, it was also a good fit because there are around 2,000 hospitals here in the US as well as around the country. And they've got a technology that they're going to be moving from the hospital into the home. So from a good fit both sides, it's that combination that eventually led to the exit. So this year in 2021, we're in integration phase with Vapotherm. They've got a field sales force of about 125 people that deploy out to about 1,500 hospitals in the US. So we're currently rolling that out. So the field sales force is talking to their existing customer base. We're talking to our value-based partners in the payer side, and we're taking a top-down, bottom-up approach in the market. So that's where we are, and we hope to establish ourselves, as the dominant force in the respiratory monitoring space.
It sounds like prior to COVID, you guys were pretty had a well built out business model, and in the remote monitoring, remote care space. We've seen the trend in over the last 12 months where telehealth companies, remote monitoring, those sorts of things, where previously the payers weren't quite as or the providers as well weren't quite as excited about rolling up their sleeves and figuring out how to pay for some of this stuff. Have y'all experienced any growth or increase in activity or adoption with COVID, or do you see that affecting your growth moving forward?
No, it actually had a positive impact on our business, no doubt about it. Telemedicine, remote monitoring, all were accelerated because of COVID. We continue to see that trend today. Prior to COVID, we established, value-based contracting. We thought that would slow down because of COVID, but it actually has advanced that business model as well. So I think it's a combination of being a pioneer in the value-based risk category, but COVID, I think, has accelerated adoption of and new reimbursement, quite frankly, for providers to provide telemedicine and remote patient monitoring services. We have seen an acceleration in that facet.
So for innovators who are in the lab now, maybe working on the next generation telehealth, telemedicine, connected device type activity, can you share a little bit about, where you're placing your bets on the shift from volume-based reimbursement to value-based healthcare? And what are you thinking about now to prepare for that?
If they're building technologies, they should consider significantly, putting your money where your mouth is, that you have to deliver better care at a lower cost, not relying on, getting just paid for a service that doesn't tie to patient outcomes. So I think that one of the great things to thinking about to keep, people passionate about what they're doing is, you're taking care of really sick patients at the end of the day. So for us, it's our mothers and fathers, our grandmas and grandpas, have difficulty breathing in their homes, right? And so focused on how can you provide the best care for them will lead to better outcomes, which will lead to cost reductions in the overall healthcare system. And payers, 100%, everywhere I see it, are putting tons of pressure on providers to do that. Put your money where your mouth is, provide better care, and just try to reduce costs in the overall ecosystem.
Great, thank you. So we're going to open it up for Q&A. We've already had some questions coming in through the chat. Before we jump in, I want to, so as to not surprise my dear panelists here, I want you to think about, as we wrap things up, what's the one piece of advice that you would give someone who is at Temple, in the Temple community, thinking about starting a company, a new idea, kind of where you are today? So based on getting started, the discovery process, development, raising money, and scaling commercialization. We always, I can speak for myself. I always think about what the end game is. It's the former investment banking person in me thinking about, I know what a due diligence checklist looks like and how I'm going to have everything buttoned up on an exit and working back from that. And I think it's important that we as an innovation community really think about that, because it does take a long time to bring these technologies and these inventions and these life-changing, life supporting, life improving benefits to society. And so we've got to be thinking about all of the different aspects across that spectrum. Okay, so we've got questions coming in. And so this is really open to everybody. First one is really, could you explain a little bit? We're interested in learning, once your IP protection was obtained, how does the business team that you partnered with early on really help you assess the competitive landscape and really kind of balance that risk benefit as you moved through the development and commercialization process? Anyone want to share how you assess risk and competitive landscape?
Well, I can join on that question. We went through we participated in a lot of business competitions when we got the idea. And in order to participate in those competitions, you always have to show a competitive landscape map. So basically, you have to do a lot of research on your own to know exactly what other companies are out there doing something similar, something, or what is the alternative of to what you are trying to offer. And with that, you get an idea to see if it's feasible to set up the type of business that you want to set up. And in order for you to pass through, the analysis of investors, you will have to really show how you are different, why you are better, because the investors are always, with many options in front of them. So they will have to choose, what is the type of technology that they want to put their money. So you have to do a lot of that homework yourself with your business partner. And as you mentioned, Tiffany, as scientists, we have to be more, interested in learning things out of your field, out of your zone of comfort. You have to also get into the business part of it and learn it. And in order to understand the topics that, the investors are talking about.
Wonderful, thank you. So building on that, this is a question for our university faculty members. Could one of you, or if you've got different perspectives to share, outline the decision-making and factors that influence one to detach from the lab, maintain the lab inventor role, time management to do both? How do you juggle it?
I can take a stab at that. And I think somebody used, maybe it was you, Tiffany, that said it's not for the faint of heart. And it is, I think Michelle Masucci at another time said it's like having a second full-time job. And you have to be prepared to, when the day is done at 7 o'clock, then that's really the beginning of your second day. And your weekends, you might be spending a lot of time doing some of the work that Oscar just talked about, is learning this other field of getting comfort with the business side of things. If you have a good entrepreneurial and business team, then they're going to really help you through that. And then some of that is an iterative process of learning. So I would say, be prepared for a lot of extra hours, because you're doing this because you love your science, and now you see there's a possibility that your science can have a bigger impact, and that's going to drive a lot of those extra hours that you're totally willing to do. The part about detaching from the lab or remaining as a lab inventor, that's a tricky one that I'm still navigating, is what work that I'm doing here at Temple and the work that I'm doing for the company, where's the overlap and how much of it feeds in to what's eventually going to be part of supporting the goals of the company. I'll say that it feels like everything I do could potentially be something that feeds into supporting the success of the company. But if there are times where you just have like an interesting project that you don't always have to separate your passion for just interesting, curious questions from this idea that it has to be applicable to your goal in the business world.
Great, thank you. Elham, do you have anything to add to that? How do you juggle everything?
Yeah, I agree with Jeffrey that you need extra hours. You need to really be passionate about what you are doing. So you don't see it as work, you see it as something that you are enjoying, like a hobby or a fun that you are really enjoying it. That will allow you to not count the hours and be devoted to the academic part and the like business part and commercialization part and move them forward.
Wonderful. Oscar, how about you?
I echo what the other two presenters mentioned. In reality, you have to put a lot of extra hours out of your normal job into this. And my recommendation is that you really get into a project that you really love, because you cannot feel that that's just another job. It has to be something that you're really passionate for in order to, get it going, because it will, in reality, will consume a lot of extra hours, a lot of time. In my case, it's not after 7 p.m. In my case, it's after 4 a.m. I prefer to work in the morning and to wake up early, but it's the same concept. You have to find that protected time to work on your idea that you are hoping to see transform into a product that is gonna go and help other people out there. So that's how you get, with this.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. So Dan, a question that popped up for you, and I'm going to moderate it a little bit because I'm working under the assumption you don't want to disclose the details of your cap table. But do you have some broad advice for negotiating with investors, and what's realistic, a range of how do you know how to value a company? How do you, especially early on, and how do you make sure that you're not giving it away?
Sure. Well, we used to do this. I can take it from the other side when I was in different pharma companies, buying, doing licenses and negotiating on the buy side. And it's really, you do the usuals, which is you start with a comps analysis. So you look at every one that you can find with public data on valuations of similar companies, similar stage, similar size. Then you do a DCF, discounted cash flow, of where you are looking for, of how much capital you need and when you're going to start to be profitable. It's all standard pieces, and you can always debate the inputs. Are you going to need 10 million? Are you going to need 50 million? Are you going to need 100 million before you turn a profit? Or in the case of biotech, usually more than that. And then you start to discuss how sort of the capital market side of it, which you would know well. So there's comps on that side too. So you sort of triangulate on valuations and then discuss. So how do you negotiate? Well, usually it's just with as much data as possible, like everything else in life. The better informed you are, which also gets back to that networking side. The more people you meet and the more information you have, the more empowered you are to come to the right conclusions together. And I'd suggest that it's a collaborative effort.
And I think you said something earlier, it's not just about the money. And so that becomes part of the deal too. If you are maybe giving up a little bit more, but you are working with investors with incredibly deep industry expertise and connections, and if it's just kind of a random angel investor who happens to like your idea but knows nothing really about the industry and has no connections, kind of factors into it as well. And I think it goes to what Oscar was saying earlier too, and Jeff, about really networking and getting out there and meeting lots of different, because this is not it's not a one, you can't do it by yourself. It's definitely a team sport, and you just got to get out there and meet the best experts.
Yeah, fortunately, in our cases, the fiduciary responsibility to take the highest price for the investors is also correlated with those who understand our business best. So it's been an easy choice or easy decisions, I should say, for us, because we can say yes and yes to the best investors and the best valuations and all of the rest of it. But as you say, it is absolutely a team sport. One of my mentors growing up in biotech used to say, you can never have enough friends in biotech.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're just about at time. It has been so fascinating for me to get to know the Temple community a little bit better. And I'm looking forward to being in Philadelphia and being back in person at some point later this year and really celebrating with y'all. So before I let you go, though, I really want to get back to your piece of advice. So we'll start at the beginning. Elham, what's your lesson learned piece of advice to pass on to your community of innovators?
I would say dream big and follow your dreams and seek help from all people that have resources. You cannot believe how many people will be willing to help you and to join you in your journey. So don't keep your ideas in your mind, put them outside for the world and try to change them into products that can improve life of a lot of people.
Excellent. Jeff.
Yeah, I think it will be similar advice across the board, but I will start off by saying, be prepared to give away some of the sense of ownership that you have of your own ideas, because you may have come up with the idea, but now you need to figure out how to get that idea to the most people that can help the most people. And you really need the help of, I think, entrepreneurs and people who know the business world and know how to network to do that. So it's a hard one for us greedy idea, egoist scientists to say we need help, and we really do to make things like this happen.
Great advice. Oscar.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback from that, but I really have the same belief that, the idea is just literally the beginning, but for a scientist, we think that having an idea is, almost 100% of the whole process, but in reality, you need the business components as much as you need the science component. So my advice will be for individuals that are interested in moving their research into potential products, to learn the business aspect of it, to get connected with the local community. There are places to meet that community. The Science Center is a good place for that. The Science Center offers a lot of seminars where you can just attend the seminar and then just look and hear. And by doing that over multiple times, you will start picking up concepts, picking up, what is going on in the city, where the investments are going. There are also programs in the School of Business here at Temple University where they invite speakers to talk about all these topics, and all these are events that are free, basically. So you can start learning these processes right here in the city. There are other institutions in the city that have similar events, and you can join all those events. If you start going to one event, you will learn about other events. And also, I would recommend going to business pitch competitions, that there are also multiple in the city that are very important to learn the process of putting together a new venture.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Dan, last bit of advice.
Oh, all these are just terrific. I echo all of them. Great panel, great discussions. To add to it, in coming from an idea to a product, which ideas are fine, but an idea is never cured anybody. In getting to the product, there are going to be 1,000 things, maybe tens of thousands of things that are going to kill the program along the way. And bringing together a network, your team, your organization. I mean, there's a reason why pharma companies are thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. It takes a lot of people to bring products to market. So just get ready that what you see in today in the small stages is not what it's going to be like when it actually gets to market. The idea that there may be some fundamental tenets to the concept that get to market, but it's going to look different. The situation is going to be different. The market's going to be different. The competition is going to be different. You're going to have to make a lot of changes along the way. So just get ready to be flexible and solve problems.
Thanks so much, Mike.
I'll wrap it up. Never run out of cash, and revenue cures everything.
Love it. Love it. Thanks all of you for sharing your background and your expertise and your stories with us. Special thanks to Michelle and the team at Temple for the invitation again. And it's been a pleasure. So Kimberly, I'll turn it over to you to wrap things up.
Thank you, Tiffany, and a big thank you to you and all of our speakers for the session today. As a reminder, the recording and slides will be posted on our website shortly. Thank you all for participating, and don't forget to join us for the next 2 days events. Tomorrow's is a spotlight on connected research on learning with comments from President Englert and Provost Joanne Epps. And our day 3 event is a roundtable on Temple University's extraordinary research response to the challenges of COVID-19, featuring a keynote speaker, Dr. Jody Black, Director of the Office of Clinical Policy and Programs at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you.